Hey guys, today I'm going to be painting the Demon Vanguard. This is from Limbo Miniatures. This is part of their Eternal War miniature line. If you didn't know, they've actually expanded this miniature line to be a full skirmish board game, and you can find that on Kickstarter right now. It's actually live, so there'll be a link to the description below on that. As well, I've done a video kind of covering some of the basics that I will link to at the end of the video. Anyway guys, this is kind of a long paint job, so I try to trim it down as much as possible. Instead of speeding it up, I'm going to trim it a bit and just kind of transition and talk about what it is I'm doing. To his shoulders is about 80 millimeters tall, which means to his top of his wings he's about 100, maybe 110 millimeters tall. So quite a lot of resin here. So let's get to it. Okay, so starting things out, as always, I'm going to be trimming him. Now, I actually did have to build him. I did that in a previous video, so you can go ahead and see that. During the Kickstarter, they actually have resin miniatures just like this, about the same size too, or larger, depending on their basing and their pose and all that. And yeah, it's nice. It's nice, but you'll have to build them just like that. So, after priming him and trimming him just a little bit, there was very little trimming needed. I then had to get this liquid green stuff and fill in some of the gaps from where I glued him. So, his body is detached from his hand that's on the rock and his 2 feet there. So, they fit there. His arm also had to be glued on, so I'm going to fill that in with this liquid green stuff, and then his hand did too, but I left that there because of the armor. I figured it looked just kind of like how the armor should, so no big deal there. And then his wings also needed to be glued on, but with the amount of glue I shoved on those things, they don't have a gap anymore. So all is well there. And starting things out, we're gonna do Abaddon Black. Now this could be kind of interesting. I'm going to paint both of these skulls. So kind of his shoulder skull and this kind of center skull in black. Then I'm also going to do the base and then these spikes here on the sword, but just the spikes. Now note that there is no true concept art. There's nothing to match here, so you can pick whatever colors you want. This is what I picked to make the Demon Vanguard that I wanted to have. But you could make him, you know, hot pink and polka dots, and that's totally fine. I would question why you're buying such expensive miniatures to paint it that way, but, you know, whatever. You do you. So the skulls are kind of interesting because I'm going to leave the center one as kind of like this black charred kind of skull, almost like a non-metallic metal. The shoulder one, I want, again, kind of this charred, dark, old look to it, and we'll get to that. So this base, by the way, takes forever. If you've noticed, there is some lava here, and so what I'm doing here is I'm just kind of tracing it. You can see that right now where I'm tracing around it. And I'm not going to be painting that black. In fact, I'm going to be painting it white here soon, and that'll really speed along the bright colors I want it to be versus how dark I want these rocks to be. So starting things out, just kind of doing a rough black job here. Now that once I have white out, I'm going to paint this. There's a little gem in his kind of guard here, and so I'm going to paint the gem white because this can be a bright color, and I want that white to kind of show through. I want his eyes to glow as well, so I'm going to paint those white as well, and then we'll move on to kind of the base lava here, and this is going to take quite a bit of time, just because it's white and black, and so in the end, I feel like I probably didn't need to take this much time. If there was a little bit of bleed over, I think it'd be fine, because I'm going to add some glowing effects that, well, not really glowing. I almost wanted it to be kind of like, you know, like a volcano erupts and there's like splatter going up. It's kind of rough. It's not a smooth glow like a light is on, right? This is moving lava and erupting and coming out of the rocks and whatnot, so I wanted it a bit rough. So it might have not been too bad. You can see even now I have some on the rock there. I'm not even concerned about that. I'm not going to touch it up. In fact, I want some white here, and I'll be adding more white on purpose here in a bit. So anyway, just kind of trace it, and you know, I mean, be as careful as you want to be. You don't want to just glob it everywhere, obviously. The more time you take on anything, the better it'll turn out. So you know, these miniatures are big resin miniatures, so they're pretty great quality and pretty expensive, so, you know, do it right. Mechanicus Standard Grey and a dry brush. I rarely use dry brushing in this video. You'll see I'm not doing a lot of dry brushing. I am doing it here. It'll pop out kind of the texture. And you notice it's a very light change. It's really... if you wanted a more drastic change, perhaps you could do a Nuln wash and then like a uniform gray from Army Painter, or even Administratum Gray if you wanted to keep in the Citadel range. You could do a brighter gray, but I'm not too concerned with it. Anyway, you dry brush the whole thing for the rocks, and it kind of brings out a little bit of texture but keeps it still fairly dark. And then you can do all the spikes, and then you also want to kind of get these edges a little bit extra. Add some more gray, or a whole nother level of highlight if you wish, to where the glow would be from the lava. We're going to be putting a wash on here later that's going to make it look really nice and really pop these out. So they might not look like much now, but they will. So it kind of gives definition to these rocks because they are so dark. But again, extra effort anywhere where it's showing or facing the white lava you've painted. And then the only other thing we're going to do is we're going to highlight the skulls. So black and gray for the skulls right now. Alright, now we have white out again, and this white is now going to go, again, with a dry brush, but I'm not necessarily dry brushing, if that makes sense. It's a very heavy load on it. I'm just trying to get that, a little bit of feathering, right, it's more of a wet dry brush, if that makes sense, around some of the crevices in the rocks. I think that'll add a whole lot, which you'll see later. And then kind of on the top, as it's kind of coming out from like this pool of like he's on like some rock pillar with lava all around him almost. And then you're going to do it around the lava itself. Now to actually paint the lava, we have lava orange. I figured that why not? That's pretty fitting. That's what it's for, right? They wouldn't name it lava orange if it wasn't for lava. So I mean, I don't know what you could paint something else lava-like, I guess, but really it's lava. So anyway, I'm covering just about all the white in this. This is pretty much the base coat on top of the white. This is why we painted it white. It'll be much brighter now. If we had painted this onto black, it'd be significantly darker. And if we had even painted on gray or anything else, the white will make it as bright as possible because these are all semi-transparent. They're not fully opaque, and so they'll let a little bit of that white out. And in fact, it is a fairly thinned down lava orange, so you'll see a little bit of that. Okay, now that that's there, we're going to get Casandora Yellow. This is where I talked about where we're going to put that wash on. And we're going to paint over all the white portions that we kind of, wet dry brushed onto the miniature. So all the glow, everything around it. We're also going to end up putting it on the lava itself, just to add a little bit of a hint of some depth to it. It's a little flat right now. We're going to add some more. But for now, it'll help, especially anywhere where it's thinned down enough to where the ridges make it look a little white. This will make it just kind of glow a little white yellow, just a little bit more yellow. Shift it a tiny bit, and then I put a little bit on these little pools here. I'm gonna play with those pools to make them look pretty nice, but they're really small. Alright, so next up is light orange, and this orange again is a little bit lighter, as you can see, and it's really watered down. It's going to look a lot more significant wet than it will dry, but as you can see, it just kind of pools into the recesses mostly, and I'm keeping it in the middle, keeping about 10% on either side. The final touch is this Dorn yellow, which I really like as a kind of a lava or even a fire, kind of that white. Instead of white hot, you do this Dorn yellow. It's close to white, but definitely in the yellow spectrum. It definitely is. It's not white, but it looks really good, as you can see. When you put this on in kind of the deepest recesses, those hottest recesses where the lava is, you don't want these on like the edges or anything. You want this to kind of really look like it's kind of the center heat point. And right there where I'm painting right there, that's where the lava comes out. So make sure to make that extra hot. Next up is black red, and we're going to be here for a while. This is going to be the base coat for all of his skin, but not his wings. We're going to... I said we. I am going to paint the wings a little bit of a darker color. I'll explain that more as we get to it. So right now, it's just his face and his body, so his legs, his arms, anything that's not armored or has horns, essentially. There are some little teeth on his abdomen. I just paint right over that. Don't worry about painting around that. The bone color you're going to paint over will go just fine over the red. It's a bright enough color. It'll show up fine, and then you don't give yourself a headache trying to avoid those tiny little teeth. Yeah, in fact, anytime you find abdomen teeth, I would just try to ignore them entirely. It's creepy anyway. So spend some careful time on his head. You don't want to make a mess of things here, and it is kind of small. And the skin wrapping around his horn is not even. It's very much like a torn flesh kind of nastiness there. So just take your time and do a good job base coating. Again, there's a lot here. Finally, we're at Nuln oil. Now, this is kind of interesting. I'm putting it in the eye sockets here, but just the eye sockets. I just want those really dark. And then I'm going to put it right here, just on this portion of his arm. It's kind of rocky and craggy, and it looks different than all the rest of his skin. And so I'm going to actually paint it a little bit darker. And so the Nuln oil is there, and then we got the Carroburg Crimson, and that's going to be on the rest of his skin. So the Nuln oil is just on that little kind of forearm part there. That's extra kind of rocky and not really like skin. You can see how different it is right now. But you want to go quick and add the Carroburg Crimson around the Nuln oil as soon as possible before it dries. Otherwise, you'll get some tide marks that you want to avoid. So, which is just kind of like these streaks that you see once the wash dries and then you wash over it. So once it's all wet, it'll blend together just fine. Again, this actually goes pretty quick, just because you're just covering the whole unit without really care in the world. Don't get it in the lava, but if it's on the rock, you won't even notice it. Next up is dark stone. So this is a different base color. It's still kind of red, but much more brown. And this is for kind of the ridges of his wings. I wanted this to just be a little bit more dynamic and draw attention that this is maybe a little bit rougher, or for whatever reason it's a little bit darker, and change up the miniature a little bit. I think it looks really nice. And I'll tie it all together with highlighting, so it won't look out of place right now as drastic as it's going to look. I'm also spending a little bit of extra time, you see, they're kind of stippling in, making sure I get into the joints there. Then I watered it down a whole lot once I was done and put it around his skin, so right around that skin area there is a little bit darker. It really seals the deal, makes it look a lot more natural, like they're sprouting out of him. Burnt red is going to be the first highlight, and as you can see, it is quite bright. I'm definitely going to bring this up a lot, and this first level highlight is the most drastic, but it's also covering the most amount. I'm not going to use any other washes on his skin. I'm not going to even bring it up to the normal burnt red. I'm going straight to this. It'll be a little bit more drastic and really pop out those muscles, and so then we can build on top of that with even brighter highlights, so he looks really good, like from more of a distance. Now, the one thing I have noticed when painting muscles is always just they tend to have these like ripples, and just brush with them as if, you know, they're like brushing with the grain like on wood. Instead, it's brushing with the muscle grain, I guess. Now we're also going to bring this up to the wings here. Now obviously the shadow portion is going to be a little bit darker, but otherwise it's going to be the same color. It's just that slight difference in the shadow and the recesses that I think really set it apart, where it's just subtle enough where it makes sense, it looks good at the end, at least I think so, but it's not like weird looking like it was some like you know, mutation or some science experiment gone wrong either. Cavalry Brown is the next one up. This is one of my favorite colors of red. I really like it. It says Cavalry Brown, but I call it a red. I guess it's a little brown, but I really dig the dark red. Now notice here, I'm actually going to put a little bit of a highlight on those where we put the Nuln oil on the rocks there. And I think that really sells the deal of just adding these highlights and getting that rigid shape to really stand out. So it's more noticeable that that's different, that's weird, that's something unique to this miniature. And really I was kind of surprised they did that. It's definitely a nice little touch. Otherwise, again, we're just kind of painting this about 80% and the 80%. So we covered up a lot of the miniature with the highlights. Now we're just covering up a little bit more and just leaving just a tiny bit around it. In fact, I would say 90%. So it's going to be mostly this color, and then the other color that we put before just kind of helps blend it together and transition it all together so it's not so stark. If we had put this on first, it would have been too much of a shift and would have looked, I think, really bad. This I think really sells the deal. And again, we are going to put this on the wings as well. Feel free, by the way, if you want to leave where it enters his skin to be a little darker. I debated whether or not to or not. I ended up making it slightly darker there. I never highlighted that at where it actually joins, but I got right up to it. But as you can see, there's a little bit of a fade in where it's a little darker there, which I think looks kind of nice. Alright, next up is Dragon Red. We are almost done highlighting. It's a lot. This is the majority of the time you're going to be spending with the miniature if you do this, but I think these little bits really help. And you can tell it's just adding a little bit. When you stack colors like this is my kind of trick and my tip I can give you for skin of any color, any kind. The more colors and the more layers you use, the more believable it is. There's that little bit of a nuance. Kind of like when you look at just Caucasian skin, you're actually seeing a little bit of the blue from the veins that go through it, and maybe even a little bit of yellow and all this other kind of stuff. Really, really sells the deal. So this final highlight is pure red. We are not going to put these on the wings, so this is just his skin. Again, it'll keep that skin a little, or those wings a little bit darker. And again, this is just kind of, as you see, I have a very tiny brush, and I'm just kind of doing edge highlighting and perhaps putting a little bit more where I want some glow. We're going to put that Casandora Yellow on this later, and so the heavier the highlight, the better when you want the glow. Rough Iron is out next, and that's going to be for his armor, and this is a really fun color. I like that it's not straight like silver, right? It's not super gray. Instead, it's almost like a brown, which works great for red. So I thought this was a great fit for it, and he should have dark armor anyway, right? But I didn't want to do like black armor. I've already done black kind of on the kind of charred skulls here, so I think this is a good alternative to that. Now we're going to do natural steel for the highlights. This shows up pretty good, but again, once we add the glow, it's going to really pop. We'll get back to that in a bit here. It looks good. It's nice. This is just getting really on the edges, really giving it a lot of shape because it is so dark. We want to make sure that the texture and the detail still shows up. So I'm not really doing a light source here. I'm not making it to where the lava is necessarily adding a ton of light. I'm assuming there's light in other places. This handle, by the way, I'm just painting it natural steel. I debated on what to do it. I thought maybe I'll make it dark, but I figured I'd just make the whole thing kind of this metal. Next up is Shining Silver. This is going to be the final highlight on this, and this is just for the edges, but I will bring it down a little bit just to give a little bit of like wornness to it, like these plates have been moving together and whatnot. But again, otherwise this is really just to capture that shade later on. It's going to look really nice. Onto dark red, which to me looks pink, which is what I was going for. I'm going to paint his wings pink and purple. And I know that sounds funny, but I really wanted to try and pull it off. I wanted it to look super fleshy, and I also wanted him to be, so he's so red and then he's on this orange base. I wanted to kind of change it up a little bit, so I wanted to go kind of more into the purple range and add a little touches of kind of these blues and purples to really make things kind of pop a bit more. The stone in his guard is going to be an exception to that, where I really want it to pop. This I'm going to blend to where it looks good. It looks natural. Just trust me here. This is a base coat only. But yeah, you're really just painting in the wings. So Grimoire Purple's out, but notice it's super thin down. I'm just glazing it on here. It's just going to slightly shift the color a little bit to a little bit of it's actually a little bit lighter, and I think a little bit more fleshy. Again, when I talked about layering colors, this is what I'm talking about. So you're going to see a little bit of that, red or that dark red underneath this, which really helps sell it. And then it ties it together with this Orc Blood, which is a lot heavier. This is going to go into all the ridges. So he has a lot of texture here. And I'm going to highlight as well. This is kind of painting in the shadow, you might say. But you could almost think of this as painting on like veins or something like that, right? It's just this kind of sickly pink purple color that I think matches really well. Again, as you can see, I think it's already looking really good. And you could probably leave it here, but this next step is going to really, really sell it. Mutant Hue, this is a bright color. You're not going to want a whole lot on your brush. My brush is almost done, and I have to reload it every single time, over and over again. But you're just going to slightly go kind of, again, with the grain, kind of with coming from the tips and going out. And as you can see, you're just going to lightly pick up a lot of the edges, put a lot of kind of marks here like that really adds the texture. And this, once it's all covered, looks fantastic. It really, really draws it in. You have kind of the base tone, which is kind of two layered colors. You have kind of the deep recesses and then this highlight. And yeah, looks really, really nice. I think, anyway. I like how it looked. But again, this is your miniature. You could paint, his wings whatever you want. The sky's the limit. Pick whatever colors you want. This is my reasoning. This is why I painted it the way I did. I think it looks good in the end. But you can certainly paint it however you wish. In fact, let me know if you bought one of these from me. I noticed that he's sold out. Limbo Miniatures has no more of these when I linked to it. So perhaps you guys bought a whole bunch of them. I'm not sure. Moving on to the Naggaroth Night, or Naggaroth Night. This is a very deep purple. Again, I wanted kind of this purple theme to kind of flow, so it stays in kind of that red range here. I'm not one to know anything about the color chart. I'm not artistic in any sense of the word, at least as far as I know. But I thought this would look cool, and I think it does. So after that, we're going to do the Drushi Violet. Now, Drushi Violet on Naggaroth Night barely makes a difference. In fact, sometimes I skip it, sometimes I don't. I decided to just to see if I'd get any more, and as you can see, I think I got some shadows, especially on that. It just needs a lot to pool in there because it is so dark. Violet Red, this is going to be mixed with Gehenna Gold, and this is kind of interesting because what this does is just add a very, it's just a tiny bit of Gehenna's Gold. It just slightly shifts the color, but also makes it metallic. I like Citadel's silvers or metallics when it comes to mixing into other colors because they don't have a lot of glitter and the glitter is very fine. So as you can see, it adds a shine to it or a sheen without making it look sparkly. Next up, now that shade, that Drushi Violet has washed, we have Alien Purple, and this is going to just kind of highlight all the different spots here. You notice it looks a little wet. It's just because I covered the whole thing. It's dry. It's not moving around. Then we have Grimoire Purple out again. You might be able to save some time by painting this at the same time. If you notice, this is an extreme highlight, so really on the top ridge there, and then on some of the lines down there to really give it that extra definition. Next up, we have Shining Silver. This is going to highlight that kind of custom guard color that we made here. And the silver works really well here. I understand that I put gold in there to begin with, but the silver works just fine. So we have Dark Vermillion, and this is mixed with Gehenna Gold. So I do apologize. I believe the screen. It was natural steel, or natural silver. I do apologize for that. So this is Gehenna's Gold and the Dark Vermillion. This is the gold we put there, and we're going to highlight this in gold instead of the silver. That's where that messed. That's just me not remembering what it is I did, and I'm the one that made up the colors. But this took days to paint, by the way. I mean, this took hours and hours. It was 9 hours of just recorded footage. There's a little bit I didn't record as well, plus all the prep time and all that. It took a while. Anyway, so we got the Carroburg Crimson out again as a wash. There's these ridges and kind of marks on it. I thought about making this stone. I thought it'd look really cool like stone, but I wanted it to kind of pop. Skeleton Bone is out now, and this is going to be all the horns. There are horns on his face, there are horns on his back, there are horns on his sword guard, and there are horns on his wing, plus his claws. So we're going to be covering all of that. At this point, the miniature's painted a lot, so take your time, be careful. You don't want to go over his skin, because we went from start to finish on a lot of these. So the skin's now completely done, right? His face is almost completely done there. His sword is completely done, so you want to make sure that you're not getting this everywhere. Now this is fun. So like I said, we were going to go back to this skull. So now I have it kind of watered down a bit more now, and I'm just kind of brushing it on as if it was a highlight, but a fairly heavy coat, almost like a glaze, but the recesses are still black. Okay, they're still black. You still see black. It looks really rough right now. It looks like you ruined it. Don't worry about it. We'll fix that. Agrax Earthshade is up next. This is my go-to dark brown cover for any skull I ever paint. I really enjoy it. I'm going to highlight it back into the skeleton bone color. You could highlight it one level higher. I debated whether or not I wanted to or not. In the end, I decided to keep his horns very dark and kind of dirty. I didn't want him to have super clean, kind of more white bones. You could do like an Upshati bone or any of the most other bone colors, I think, are actually a lot darker than the skeleton bone, which is more yellow, almost like a mummy color. We're also going to put that on the skull, and as you can tell already, just that tiny shift with the Agrax Earthshade. I'm not putting it in the recesses of the eyes; those are still black. Makes it look a lot better. Now I'm going to come back with the skeleton stone, or the skeleton bone, and get these kind of the teeth and horns, and he's got some horns below as well on the skull there. Next, we're going to move to Flash Glitz Yellow, and this is just going to be for his eye glow. So I'm just putting that pretty much over the white. It's really watered down. Next up is the Dorn Yellow. These are just for the center. So he has no pupils. Instead, it's almost like it's glowing like fire. Almost like it would be coming out of his eyes. I thought that would look kind of cool. Skeleton Bone's out again, just to highlight. So again, you're just going to kind of cover in all the raised portions. I'm not worried about necessarily getting extra heavy highlights where there's a light source like from the lava or anything like that. I'm just kind of adding definition so you can see it from farther away. Again, you can go brighter if you want a cleaner look. I want it a little bit darker, a little bit dirtier, and in my opinion, a little bit more yellow and just kind of fitting in with the theme a little bit. If you had some white bones though, that'd look really sweet too. I was really tempted to. Next up we have Lothern Blue, and then again this is really watered down. I want to see a little bit of white below it too. This is kind of doing a gem, and then I'm going to do a little bit of an OSL effect, so I'm going to add just a little bit of that watered down blue around it. Then I'm going to come back with the white and put just a little dot of white at one corner, and then the other corner I'm going to just kind of give a curvature of, that's like the light escaping out the bottom of the gem. Next up we have Gehenna's Gold. This is straight up Gehenna's Gold. This is a very minor highlight. It's very light. If it's heavy, it looks really, really gaudy. But as you can see in the light, it really shines when you shift it. And see right there in the light, looks really cool. Otherwise, if you didn't want the metallic shine, you could just add white to your previous mix, and that would look fine. Now this time I got the dry brush out for the skeleton stone, or skeleton bone. I keep saying that wrong, my apologies. And I'm just going to brush every angle, every which way, just kind of getting every edge that I can. This is the final, as you can see, it looks very weathered. It looks very old and charred and dirty and messed up. Really dig that. I've never done a bone like that or a skull like that, but I'm really happy with how it turned out. Next up is Leather Brown. It goes to show that even with this demon, you're still using leather, right? This is for his straps. You could pick any strap color you wanted. I thought about maybe even doing pure black or like a black gray. Ended up doing the leather brown, just to add a little bit more brown into the mix, and I didn't want them to be a focal point on the miniature, and so I wanted to kind of make them closer, not stand out too much. Now, Casandora Yellow. Now we're going to add the highlights to him himself. So right now everything else is kind of glowing, but you can see right here, see how that shifts that highlighting? Looks awesome. I think it looks great. And you're just going to kind of do this everywhere where you think that the light would be kind of making maybe the fabric glow, or if he's leaning over so his chest would be a little bit brighter. It's just going to ever so slightly shift that kind of red to make it a little bit more yellow, and then on everything else it's going to show up even more. I think it's really nice. I put it underneath his arm. I put it, right there where his kind of hilt is. It shows up on the armor, fantastic. Even a little bit on his sword, especially those spikes. Those spikes will take it a lot. That gray highlight we added earlier, and even on the bottoms of his wing. I didn't want to go crazy here, but a little bit there I think goes a long way. Next up is Abaddon Black. Guys, we are almost done. We've almost made it. Believe it or not, this is days and days since I first started it. This was a long progress for me, and probably the most I've ever painted a miniature. This was by far kind of me at my limit, or at my skill level currently. So we're going to varnish it, and here he is. Guys, I hope you really enjoy him. I loved painting him. He was fantastic. What a great design. What a great quality. Just overall so impressed with being able to paint a miniature like this. It's so different than the little soft plastic ones we get in board games. This is really high quality. Very, dense, hard plastic. Lots of detail. Perfect detail. Minimal cleanup. Just all around. Really, really liked it. And I hope you liked it too. If you want to see more Eternal War coverage, be sure to subscribe. I'm going to keep covering that, and I'm going to be painting more miniatures from the game, from the Kickstarter itself. I'd like to thank all of my Patreons. You guys rock. You're the best group I've ever had, and you guys make all of this possible. Thank you so much. Guys, I'll talk to you next time.